Good morning, everyone. I will call the September 20 meeting of Ventura County Local Agency Formation Commission meeting to order. Carmen, can you lead us in the pledge?
Absolutely. Please rise, face the flag, ready to begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call.
Commissioner Parks.
Here.
Commissioner Parvin.
Here.
Commissioner Ramirez.
Here.
Commissioner Rooney. I'm sorry, she's absent. Commissioner
Here.
Ross.
Here.
Commissioner Zaragoza.
Here.
Alternate Commissioner Waters.
Here.
Alternate Commissioner Bill De La Pena.
Here.
Here. Agenda review. As a matter of order, I would suggest we take 14 right after 12, prior to 13. So we'll have closed session after item 12, and then upon return have the compensation discussion on open meeting under number 13. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Are there any commission presentations or announcements? Hearing none. Item 6 is public comments. That's for items that are not scheduled on the agenda. Is there anyone? I have no cards on any items that are not on the agenda. Okay. We'll go to the consent calendar. Do I have a motion, or are there any comments or corrections?
Move to approve.
So moved or seconded.
Commissioner Parvin moved approval.
Actually, she did, and I seconded her.
She
She was a little bit
Doesn't
ahead of
matter.
me.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We'll go to item 9, which is responsibilities of the commission and the applicant during the LAFCo process.
Good morning, Chair Freeman and commissioners. For the record, Michael Walker, your legal counsel. At your commission's July meeting, you asked for some guidance with respect to the responsibilities of your commission and the responsibilities of an applicant in connection with a application or proposal for a change of organization, such as an annexation. In response to that, I put together a memo that is in your staff report, starting at page 15, intending to provide you with some guidance. If you delete the footnotes, I put those in there. I figured at least Commissioner Ramirez, my fellow lawyer, would appreciate footnotes. But if you take the footnotes out, it's less than 2 pages long. So it's intended really to be a brief summary of the respective responsibilities. And because it is brief, I'm not going to repeat what's in the memo this morning. But I did think that it may be helpful to your commission to have me compare and contrast a little bit more your role as a quasi-legislative body with the role of what we call a quasi-judicial body. For your commissioners who are members of the Board of Supervisors or city councils, you commonly will sit in your capacity as a quasi-judicial body, particularly in land use matters, and even for our commissioners who sit on special district boards. If you have an ordinance that applies to a member of the public, you may be sitting in a quasi-judicial capacity if you have to make a call on whether that ordinance was violated and what the penalty is for the violation of that ordinance. So I thought, as I said, it would be helpful to maybe compare and contrast those a little bit, because your commission sits in a quasi-legislative capacity. In the quasi-judicial capacity, that body is there to serve as the decider of facts and the decider of law, and to make a decision that, by its nature, will determine and or affect the rights of the parties to that proceeding. And so in that capacity, it's really important to think about what we refer to as the burdens, the burden of producing evidence, the burden of proof that guides it, a judge or a quasi-judicial decision maker. And there are essentially two that apply in that context. There's what's called the burden of producing evidence, and then there's what's called the burden of proof. With respect to the burden of producing evidence, what that says is a party, usually what I'll call the moving party, the party that has triggered the need for the quasi-judicial body to make a decision. The moving party typically has the burden of producing evidence. And that means that party needs to submit at least sufficient evidence to establish each of the essential elements of the case or the cause of action. And what it means is the other side, the opposing party, doesn't have to produce anything. The opposing party can sit on its hands, so to speak, and say, I don't think the moving party can produce enough evidence to even meet that minimum burden of producing evidence. And if the moving party doesn't do that, the moving party loses, even though the opposing party hasn't done anything. That's the burden of producing evidence. Then there's the burden of proof, which most of us are familiar with. It's also sometimes referred to as the burden of persuasion. And the burden of proof, as you all know, in the criminal context, is beyond a reasonable doubt. In most civil actions, the burden of proof is is a preponderance of the evidence. Another way of saying it's more likely than not that I'm right and the other side is wrong. Sometimes in civil actions, there's also a burden of proof that's called the clear and convincing evidence standard. But in these contexts, it's the moving party usually that bears the burden of proof. So the moving party has to convince the judicial body, the quasi-judicial body, that I have presented to you a preponderance of the evidence. When you considered all the evidence, it's more likely than not I'm right. If I don't meet that, if it's 50-50, I lose. And so that's what the burden of proof is in a nutshell in the quasi-judicial context. Coming back to your body, here, your commission, you serve in a quasi-legislative context. And these burdens don't apply in the same way before your commission. With respect to, for instance, the burden of producing evidence, an applicant, yes, does have a need to present in its application all of the evidence and information that the law requires it to provide, as set forth in your governing law. We refer to in the shorthand as CKH, the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act. But it just needs to provide that information and evidence in connection with its application and working with your executive officer. And typically, when a certificate of filing is done by your executive officer, that indicates that the applicant has submitted sufficient information to comply with CKH. Now, the burden of producing evidence doesn't fall alone on the applicant, because again, your body's sitting as a quasi-legislative body. And so you aren't deciding the rights of parties. You're deciding what is in the best interest of the county as a whole. And so in that context, your commission and your executive officer also have a responsibility to produce evidence. And one way that you do that regularly is through the municipal service reviews that you review and adopt for all the cities in the county and for all the special districts. That information is available there. It doesn't have to be presented directly in the context of an applicant. You can refer to that. That's evidence that's out there and available to you that you're required to produce on a regular basis. And likewise, the CKH, your law actually requires your executive officer with each application that is filed to prepare a report to your body and to make a recommendation. So the staff report that you get with that recommendation is also part of the evidence that is coming in front of your body. So in the quasi-legislative context, no one party bears the burden of producing evidence. It's this collective evidence that's then presented to your commission for your commission to make a decision. And likewise, it's not the applicant that per se bears the burden of proof. There's no preponderance of the evidence standard that applies to your commission. There's no clear and convincing evidence standard that applies to your commission. Now, naturally, the applicant has, in a sense, a burden of persuasion. The applicant wants to persuade your commission to rule in its favor. But likewise, anybody who appears before your commission on that item, be it the applicant, be it another proponent of the application, be it an opponent of the application, be it your executive officer who has a recommendation, they also likewise bear a burden of persuading you that what they're arguing for is the right thing to do. So again, in that context, no one party bears the burden of persuasion. And ultimately, it's up to each commissioner to look at all of the evidence that's presented, give that evidence the weight each commissioner thinks it deserves, look at all of the factors that CKH requires you to look at, as well as any other factors that you deem pertinent, and give those factors the weight each commissioner decides it's entitled to. And then from that, come together and make what the courts refer to as a sound and fair legislative decision in accord with CKH. So that's kind of a short, compare and contrast of what a judicial body does versus what your commission does. With that, I certainly would be happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Madam Chair, so in 25 words or less, you're saying when we're here, we have LAFCo responsibilities, and we got to wear our LAFCo hats, not our agency hats.
That is also correct. That is also correct. But you are, again, emphasizing that. And there's actually the Supreme Court back in our Supreme Court in our state in 1941, and it repeated this language just last year, says that what you do in this role is you serve the purpose of enacting intelligent legislation upon complicated problems of modern society. That's a definition of what a legislature is supposed to do. So you aren't determining individual rights. You're making that big decision. And so yes, as a commission, you're looking at the whole county and making a decision as to what's in the best interest of the county as a whole, not your particular agency.
Commissioner Ramirez?
Thank you. I have a question. I really appreciate your helping us understand our duties and rights and obligations, and I just wish I could get some credit for it, continuing ed credit. But I do have a question about one of your footnotes. It's 18, prohibiting inquiry into thought processes of LAFCo commissioners. Is that something, it basically says that litigants can't ask a commissioner how they arrived at a particular decision. Is that also true for, just as an aside for my own personal information on other matters that have nothing to do with LAFCo? Does that apply to other legislative bodies such as a city council, a board of supervisors? Is that a general principle?
Yes, that is that law applies to any body sitting in a quasi-legislative function. So when your city council is adopting an ordinance, it would apply. When the board of supervisors is adopting an ordinance or a special district, it would apply. You certainly can volunteer during the deliberations what your motivations are and what your thought processes are. This says that no one can force you to do that, and certainly, as you indicate, in litigation, you cannot be forced to say, here's how I arrived at my decision, here were my motivations.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 10, which is LAFCO 16.
We need a receive and file motion.
So moved.
Yes,
We need a motion. and a
I
second.
didn't think that was an action item.
Motion to receive and file, I guess.
So we have a first and a second on the motion.
It is a receipt.
There was no, that was
No
just
action.
receive and file?
Yeah.
Right,
I guess-
okay.
Yeah,
So we have to move on
sorry.
that? We should move on that
Why not? Doesn't hurt.
So we're moving on to item 10.
after we vote on receiving and filing.
We don't have to have a motion if we receive and file, I
Mr.
don't
Walker?
think.
It won't hurt to do it if you want to do
It
it.
is an action item.
Yeah, but,
Huh?
Number 9's an action.
yeah,
Still need a motion?
Yeah, it says
Yeah.
action item.
it's a recent,
All right.
Might as well.
so
Do I have a motion?
I moved.
Approve the report?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay. Moving on to item 10.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. This is agenda item number 10. It is related to LAFCO 1607, a City of Ventura reorganization called North Bank. So a little bit of background, just to refamiliarize yourselves with this if you need it. The proposal is a reorganization that includes an annexation to the City of Ventura, and this is to allow for the development of 193 residential units on approximately 24 acres located in the unincorporated community of Saticoy to the east of city boundaries. The Commission considered this proposal on 3 different occasions. The first was in November 16th of last year, and that was really as an update. And the Commission kind of expressed a number of concerns with the proposal, and the action there was to receive and file that item. In February of 15th, that was the first time the Commission actually considered the reorganization at a public hearing, and the Commission continued that until the April 19th hearing, at which the Commission did approve the project. Now, there were 4 issue areas that were the focus of the Commission primarily at all 3 of these hearings. They were related to water supply, flooding, impacts to Saticoy Sanitary District, and potential land use conflicts. Now, by the April 19th meeting, the Commission determined that all of those issues were adequately addressed, save for water supply. So as part of the Commission's approval at that April meeting, the Commission imposed a condition, condition number 9, which states that this reorganization shall not be recorded until the General Manager of Ventura Water submits to the LAFCo Executive Officer written confirmation with supporting documentation that the city has an adequate and available long-term water supply to meet demand. Now, in response to this condition, excuse me, on June 6th, the acting General Manager of Ventura Water submitted a letter to me, attached to which was the 2017 Comprehensive Water Resources Report that was prepared by the city and accepted by the City Council. Now, staff determined that the information that was provided did not satisfy the condition. However, at the city's request, we did schedule it for Commission consideration at the July 19th meeting. So the Commission did consider the information provided by the city, and it determined at that meeting that the letter did not satisfy the condition. And the Commission continued the matter to a future meeting, this meeting, and requested additional information consistent with the condition of approval. Now, in response to the continuance and the request for additional information, the city submitted a second letter on September 5th, and this was signed by both the acting General Manager of Ventura Water and the city's Community Development Director. Now, the city staff's September 5th letter, it concludes that the city has adequate, timely, and available water supply to meet demands for the subject project, as well as other development projects that are under construction or scheduled to be completed within the next several years. Water supplies will also be sufficient in the long term. So it does appear that the city satisfied the first part of that condition about writing a letter stating as such. Now, the supporting documentation for this conclusion was a water balance calculation sheet that was attached to that letter. Now, the water balance calculation sheet is based on information from the 27 Comprehensive Water Resources Report. And it utilizes a 2-year average demand baseline to reach its conclusions. And it used the previous 2-year average demand throughout the city, 2015 and 2016. You'll remember the June 6th letter used a single-year baseline, just 2016.
Before you go to the next slide, could I ask a question? The city's response was that they will have long-term supply, not that they have a long-term sufficient supply, right?
Yes, that's from the letter itself. That's verbatim. Will.
That they will have it sometime in the future.
Well, in this context, they're saying that they do have water supply currently, or will have supply currently, to meet demand from basically approved projects. Beyond that, I think they're relying on additional water supplies.
Thank you.
So the baseline factor has been a topic of discussion. It was last time, too. Because there's been several different baselines used throughout this process. They're the ones that are used in the Comprehensive Water Resources reports, then they're the ones that have been used in the city's letters. Now, the most recent 2017 Comprehensive Water Resources report uses a 10-year average baseline, and that's the 17,111 acre-feet per year. Last year's Comprehensive Water Resources report uses a 5-year average baseline, and if we were to apply that to the most recent demand factors in the current water resources report, that comes to 15,236. Now, the Comprehensive Water Resources report also identifies a 3-year baseline demand. However, the 3-year baseline demand has not been used in any of the water resources reports since they've been prepared beginning in 2013. But that's 1,550. Now, the city's September 5th letter uses a 2-year baseline, as I mentioned. So what I've provided here is just a comparison of all these baselines. You'll notice a lot of this is the same information that was provided last time. Using the 10-year average baseline, this is for current demand under drought conditions. Let me switch to the pointer here. Using the 10-year baseline, there's a deficit, a water deficit, ranging from 2123 acre-feet per year to 264. Using the 5-year average baseline, it begins with a deficit of 1,248 acre-feet up to an available supply of 611. Even the 3-year baseline demand, again, it's never been used in these reports. It starts off with a deficit of 162 up to 1697. And only with the 2-year baseline demand that's in the September 5th letter does the range stay positive with an available supply of 760 to 2,619. So that's basically what's available as of 2016 currently. Now, there are a number of development projects that have been approved and have been allocated water supply. Now, these are outside Casitas boundaries because according to city staff, the city and Casitas have entered into an agreement under which Casitas, who provides wholesale water to the city, about the western third of the city, has confirmed that they will have an adequate supply to meet anticipated demand within their boundaries and the city. So according to city staff, those additional allocations should not be factored in to the overall demands for the city, which is reasonable. I get that, and I confirm this with Casitas. So these are only projects that have been approved that are outside Casitas boundaries. Now, the proposed project is also outside Casitas boundaries, so they're not, Casitas water is not available to them. So currently under construction or in plan check, there are over 1,000 units and about 250,000 square feet of uses with a total demand, again, this is in the Water Resources Report, of 414 acre-feet per year. There's an additional 662 units and 235,000 square feet that have been approved and allocated water, but they're not seeking building permits yet. And this was a total demand of 299 acre-feet per year. So here are the totals there. Now, according to the city's letter, these allocations for these approved projects should be reduced by 20% to reflect the current stage 3 water shortage event, which mandates a 20% reduction in usage. Now, I didn't find that anywhere in the Comprehensive Water Resources Report that is what is to be done with these projects that have been approved and allocated water, but I did go ahead and factor that into the calculations here. So with the 20% reduction, it comes to this amount, 331 for near-term demand, 239 for the longer-term demand, for a total of 570 acre-feet per year. So here is the calculations with just the near-term demand. That's demand that's in plan check or under construction. Again, with the 10-year baseline of the 27 Comprehensive Water Resources Report, the range is still a negative. Under the 5-year, it starts negative and goes up to 280. Under the 3-year baseline, it starts with a deficit and goes up to 1366. And under the 2-year baseline demand in the city's letter, it starts at 429 up to 2288. Now that's just for the near-term demand. When you include the projects, all of the projects outside Casitas boundaries that have been allocated water, you added an additional 239 acre-feet of demand. And again, the baseline of the 2017 Comprehensive Water Resources Report stays negative. The 5-year begins with a deficit of 1818 up to a available supply of 41. 3-year baseline, 732 to 1127. And then with the 2-year average baseline, it ranges from a supply of 189 to 2,049. This just is all of the tables combined if there's discussion. And with that, the recommendation is for the commission to determine if condition number 9 has been satisfied and or provide any appropriate direction. And that concludes my presentation.
Are there any questions of staff? With that, I will open the public hearing.
Sorry, I've got a question.
Oh, excuse me, go ahead.
Kai, in one of your letters, you had noted that you had gotten with the acting general manager, and he had indicated from that meeting that he was going to come back to you with additional materials at a future time. And then sometime after that, he had replied back saying, actually, we're not going to be sending you any additional materials. Do you recall what those additional materials might be that the acting general manager was hoping to supply you?
I do not. That took place in response to the city's June 6th letter. So the acting water manager sent a letter, and attached to which was the Comprehensive Resources Report. Before I wrote my letter that it was incomplete or that it didn't satisfy the condition, I met with the water manager indicating my concerns on why it didn't meet the condition. And it was at that meeting that he indicated that additional information would be provided. So I waited for that information before I made a final determination. I got contacted a few days later, and he said that the city was not going to provide additional information. And then in response to that, I wrote the letter concluding that I didn't think the condition was satisfied.
Right. In their most recent letter to, I believe it was our chair, the city is clearly in disagreement with some of your conclusions that you've provided for us. From the best of my knowledge and just from calculating, because I feel like a mathematician after this, just trying to figure out what the numbers are, would you be able to describe what they're in disagreement with you on regarding the demand and supply?
I don't. I have not. It's not been demonstrated where in my calculations there was an error made. So to this, I don't know, and I don't believe there has been any errors made. It does appear that based on the June 6th letter and then the most recent letter from the city, that they are interpreting the Comprehensive Water Resources Report in a way that is not consistent with the conclusions of the Comprehensive Water Resources Report. So, and that may be just fine and legitimate, but if it's not in there, reflected in there, it's really difficult for me to kind of compare apples to apples. You know, for instance, with the 20% decrease in these approved allocations, that's not reflected in the Comprehensive Water Resources Report, so that's not something that somebody would be aware of when trying to calculate water supply.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, I have a question. Can you clarify Commissioner Parks' question when she asked about the verbiage of the September 5th letter, where staff agrees with or likes the verbiage in this letter compared to the last letter, where it says they have adequate supply of water, and then Commissioner Parks will have adequate supply or will not. The letter states that they do have adequate supply or will have adequate supply.
I think if I understand the question correctly, the city concludes that it has an adequate water supply to meet current demand plus the demand of all of the approved projects that have been allocated water supply. And that's where you have the remainder of 108, sorry. That's where you have this 189 to 2,049. So they're saying that after you take all of the approved projects, all allocations, plus demand, that's going to be left over. So essentially, the city is saying that for all of the proposed projects in the future, this is what they currently have available. And this, of course, is based on the 2-year baseline demand. So anything beyond that, for instance, there are several projects approved or being proposed within the area outside of Casitas' boundaries. And if those are approved, they are currently in the process, this 189 basically is allocated. So therefore, for future projects beyond that, that are allowed under the general plan, under drought conditions, it looks like they'll be starting with a zero or a deficit. And that's for future projects.
If I could clarify, what I was asking was, the way I read the letter is they say they have adequate supply for the development that's proposed, and that they will have long-term supply in the future. And so I was wondering if that's does answer our condition to determine that they have adequate long-term supply. And I guess it's a kind of semantical argument, but I'm just wondering if that's what they mean. Like, we know of the proposals in that they have to bring in long-term supply in the future. We don't know if they will be completed. It's the future. And right now, I don't know if we have those guarantees that those long-term projects are moving forward and won't have any roadblocks. So that was just my question: is do we know for sure they'll have that long-term supply? And it's an important question, and I don't know if we have it answered.
I think the city may address that issue. Or the city staff should address that issue, I think.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I have 17 speaker cards and 7 that have given up, in addition, 7 additional who have given up their time for the Venoni family to speak. So I would ask that if you could keep your comments succinct and to the point, and normally we have 5 minutes. Each person has 5 minutes, so we'll try to monitor that very closely, and I will open the public hearing. First speaker is Charles Venoni.
Good morning. Okay, we've owned this property for 63 years, longer than some of you have been alive. Conversion of this property to residential has been a part of the city's general plan for well over the city's general plan, as well as the Saticoy area community plan. For many years, we did not submit our application to develop the surrounding property. Urbanization made it difficult to operate, so in 2004, we submitted the application. The land is no longer prime farmland because of the urban surroundings. It is infill, even by the strict definition of SOAR. This property can no longer be farmed because of the decisions that local governments have made. The cost of production on this property have increased due to the proximity of housing. No one will lease to this land to farm, even at greatly reduced rates. Buffer zones between fields and homes have become our responsibility. Land was taken from our property, resulting in less usable acreage. Businesses cannot indefinitely survive on losses of property and increased operating costs without a positive cash flow. Farming is a way of life, but it's also a business. We have done everything that has been asked of us through the 14-year entitlement process with the City of Ventura, and now through a year working with your commission on annexation. LAFCo staff says there isn't enough water to serve the development. Ventura says they have sustainable water supply. The city's analysis, interpretation of their numbers, ongoing water conservation measures, and their efforts to secure additional water sources have been verified. In addition, if some unforeseen circumstances occurs, the city's policy is that building permits will not be issued at a time that water is in question. What more can we reasonably do? What more can reasonably be required? We cannot continue farming, and we cannot move forward with this project until the annexation is approved. Why can't this matter be resolved so we can finally concentrate on farming in the Las Posas Valley, where our family hopes to farm for another 100 years? If I ask the question of you, were you pro-farmer, I'm sure you would say yes. But actions have caused the reduction in farming. This farmer cannot farm because of your delays. A number of you have expressed sympathy for the family. Thank you. We have learned a lot from this experience, but there is something we still cannot understand. Why has a process meant to build a neighborhood become so decisive? Shouldn't it be a procedure that is as much about building community as it is about building houses? We wanted to come together in a cooperative spirit and with mutual respect to work things out. Yet, that has not been our experience. We don't want you to feel sorry for us, but we do ask you to be aware. Changes need to be made. Anyone who has followed the rules and is trying to work with you should not be treated as we've been treated. Our livelihood put at risk, our lives put on hold for years, and their motives and character publicly questioned. Why is this played out? Why this has played out isn't right. No matter who is standing before you, we appreciate your empathy, but what we truly need is you to be fair. So why can't we stop kicking this down the road and vote to acknowledge the city's fulfillment of this last requirement for annexation? Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions of the applicant? I would like to, let me just read the names of those that gave up their time for Mr. Vanoni. Andy Vanoni, who supports the project. Charles Matthew Vanoni. Mary T. Poe. Julian Vanoni. Charles Aslan Vanoni. And Ann Vanoni. And they all support the project and gave up their time for Mr. Vanoni to speak. Thank you.
Okay.
Is the water manager? Do we know if the city water manager?
I don't see it from the city. The next speaker is Mike Vanoni. Is Mike Vanoni here? Supports the project. Is there, on these cards, I don't see anyone that's identified themselves as from the city of Ventura.
Yes.
Would you like to, what is your name, sir?
Dave Ward.
Okay.
There's a second name as well, Joe McDermott.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I didn't see the card.
Certainly. Good
Yes.
morning,
Good morning.
Chair Freeman and Commissioners. I'm Dave Ward, representing the city, along with Joe McDermott. There's also a speaker card there, also from the city, from Ventura Water. So we're really here today to address any questions you may have. As the executive officers already presented to you, we provided the satisfying materials to comply with Condition 9, including the letter that indicates that we do have adequate and available long-term water supply. We provided the background documentation. Mr. McDermott will be able to answer any questions specifically related to that. In your presentation today, there were some comments related to 20% reductions for drought. That whole process is a partnership with the entire community of Ventura. It does address current developments that actually are using less water through the devices of low flow construction methodologies, landscape requirements. That all goes into all new projects. There's also the requirement of Title 24 through the building code. Part of the partnership also relates to existing development throughout the city, where we have landscape retrofit programs, turf replacement programs. All of that works together on how we address our current and long-term water supplies and ensure that we have good economic and community development throughout our city. So those are all important aspects. There's also references to the numbers from the executive officer's perspective not quite making sense. Part of our pending projects that make it through the entitlement stage, they don't all make it through to plan check or actually get constructed. There could be finance reasons, there could be other changes that occur. We track all of this. In fact, the city of Ventura is constantly tracking our water supply and demand. We provide the city council those expired projects. Those allocated water numbers then go back into the supply. And so that happens on an annual basis. And that's our obligation as professional staff at the city, across the city, to ensure that we are professionally looking at our water supply and demand numbers and ensuring that we can effectively tell our community, our city council, our decision makers at the Planning Commission that we are monitoring and tracking our water supply and are available to supply those projects that we can approve and hope to move forward. So with that, I'll conclude my comments, but we are available, and Joe McDermott is available to answer any questions if you like. We could call him up now if that's your choice.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
I have a
Yes.
couple. I guess we were having the discussion, you broke it into two sentences in the letter. One says we have adequate supply, and the next sentence says we will have long-term supply. But our condition was that you have long-term supply, not that you will have it. And one of the, as I recall, ways that you're looking at having long-term supply in the future is through wheeling, is that correct?
Those questions would be better with Joe McDermott as the Assistant General Manager of Ventura Water.
It is correct?
That's correct, but I'd have him answer those questions specifically.
Okay, so we'll wait and ask the wheeling questions to your water folks.
Certainly.
Thank you. Joe McDermott?
Morning, Chairman Freeman, Commissioners. Joe McDermott, Assistant General Manager of Ventura Water. I've been in the water industry in this business for about 22 years. I am also a state licensed registered civil engineer with the state of California. I will mention the CWRR, the Comprehensive Water Resources Report. This is a report that we started voluntarily as a city putting together back in 2013 from City Council's request to closely monitor and track our water supply and demands as we move forward in the years with development projects coming on board. The person that actually oversees putting together the Comprehensive Water Resource Report, the CWRR, Susan Rundgren, has roughly 30 years of experience in water resources. And I just want to emphasize, we really do know the numbers and we do track things closely. And I am basically here to tell you that we do, in fact, have adequate, available, long-term water supply. We have it now, and we'll continue to have long-term supply. As shown in the water balance calculation sheet that was submitted as an attachment with the letter, stamped, signed, certified by myself, registered engineer. The numbers that you see there towards the bottom, the 189 to 2048, 2049, I think there was a rounding difference between my numbers and the executive director's. But page 5 of 6 of the staff report, the executive director's numbers do corroborate our calculations. There is the concern that he raised with regards to whether it makes sense to use 2 years to establish a baseline. And I'm here to tell you that it, in fact, does in this case. The use of a 5-year or 10-year was 5 up until, I believe, the last comp report. We switched it to 10. The reason we modified the number of years that we use to establish baseline is just it kind of depends on a number of factors. We use 10 in the comp report because we're really projecting out long-term water demand, and then, of course, comparing that to supplies that we believe that we'll have based on normal hydrogeologic conditions, non-drought conditions, okay? So that's where the report is really focusing on. For this situation, when we're looking at, we're currently in a water shortage event, stage 3 event, 20% mandatory conservation. It does not make sense to use the 3, 5, 10 years. The reason for that is we just went into mandatory water conservation 2 years ago. And so the demand numbers that we've been seeing reflect those conservation efforts, okay? So we're, right now, we're 26%, conserving 26% year-to-date compared to 2013. A lot of conservation going on, and so, but to use any longer period of time would yield inaccurate results when we're looking forward, assuming moving forward that we're going to stay in water shortage. So 2 years in this case is appropriate. It doesn't really matter whether it was in the report or not. We have been requested by City Council last go-around to go ahead and start projecting out, assuming that we're going to stay in water shortage, so that's something that is around the corner. But just remember, this is a voluntary report that myself and my staff put together. We are, in fact, developing new water supplies. The question with Metropolitan and Wheeling Water, that water supply actually isn't even included in some of the numbers in the Comprehensive Water Resource Report. That particular supply is really intended more for backup and for other purposes, blending to enhance water quality on the east end of the town. If you look in the Comprehensive Water Resources Report, Table ES-1, Executive Summary-1, in fact, assuming normal hydrogeologic conditions in the long term, 2030, we're looking to have a water balance of somewhere between 3,366 and 9,242 acre-feet of water, which doesn't even include the Met water that we're talking about wheeling from the state. So with my time wrapping up, I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you have.
Since Mr. McDermott is here from the city, directly responsible for water, are there questions of Mr. McDermott?
I have a question. Thank you for being here. I personally just would like to get a little more information about the state water proposal idea, how long that would take, what would it cost, who would pay for it? Can you say?
Certainly, Commissioner Ramirez. Just really quick, we are about to enter into the next stage of that project. A notice of participation is going to be going out to start the environmental review process. We're in the process of wrapping up an alignment study that has been ongoing for the past 6 months to a year, roughly. By the time we actually get that that pipeline in place and connect, have all the agreements in place. We're looking at about 3 to 4 years from now before we'll have that.
And what is your sense of how much water would be available under normal conditions? And we're not in normal conditions anymore, but.
Point of clarification from the Wheeling through the state, connecting the state
Yes.
project. So we have a entitlement, for the city itself has an entitlement of 10,000 acre feet per year. We're not counting on that. We are at this point estimating, as far as what we're going to be counting on, more for backup supply and for these other reasons I talked about, water quality enhancements, between 1,500 and 3,000 acre feet per year. So quite below, in fact, what the average allocation has been off the state water system, which has been roughly 45-50%.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I do have a couple. So when you look at the predictability, that's kind of what we're doing here, and we have 10-year, 5-year, 3-year, 2-year, all kind of predicting what it, based on that amount of years, what you have going forward. And you were saying that the reason you've gone to 2 years is because it better reflects the demand, not necessarily the supply. Is that right?
Commissioner Parks, so correct. Using 2 years in this particular situation is the appropriate thing to do because that does better reflect the current condition that we're in, and it assumes that we're moving forward and that we'd stay in stage 3 water shortage. So to start to use 3 or 5 or 10, really, and again, we use 10 in the comp plan because we're projecting out, assuming normal hydrogeologic conditions, and that more water supply would be available. We've been cut back, groundwater wells, casitas, so on and so forth. So those are really the worst case numbers, 189 to 2049, whatever that was. And it's assuming that we're staying in shortage. So again, if you look at the comp plan, those numbers are much larger.
So the ones that go out, like say, the farther they go out, it seems like the less water you have available, right? And when you look at that, when you look at those figures, and those figures are based on normal years, not drought years. I mean, can we get that slide up where it shows the 10, 5, 3, 2, and so the longer you go out, it predicts the less water you will have, right? So.
Well, point of clarification, when we talk about baseline demand, we're looking backwards in time.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're taking the actual water usage that was used. So in the case of the 5-year, we looked at what we actually used in the last 5 years. Now in the Comprehensive Water Resources Report, we use 10 years. But that's looking back, and so that establishes the baseline. So then to that demand, you average that out and you start adding on. If any development that comes on board, you add on to that.
So that's what I was saying. So that basically the amount of water that is available has not changed in the 10, 5, 3. It's more the demand for that water. You haven't added new sources of water or anything that has.
For these calculations, correct.
So it really does just reflect people are using less water, the demand, because they can't. They really shouldn't be. So that was one question I have. The other one is looking at the aspect of Wheeling and just. I know Supervisor Zaragoza and Supervisor Bennett are going to have a 2-hour water workshop on West County water, I think, primarily coming at our next Board of Supervisors meeting.
Board of Supervisors meeting, yes. It's an hour and a half agenda item that we have.
And I imagine you'll be bringing experts.
Yes.
And I think that will probably be something very beneficial for our LAFCo commissioners to attend if we can arrange that, because I think understanding the complexities of water, the whole concept of Wheeling is very complex, I believe, particularly with how the city already has some guarantees and all that. But my understanding with Wheeling water, you get the water because there's extra out there, and it allows, therefore, in times of plenty, not drought, there is the ability to wheel water. Is that accurate, that it is determined to an extent based on the extra supply at Met, for example?
So every year, they do come out with an allocation for each water contractor with the state. We are a contractor. We just have not been connected. We've been paying roughly $1 million a year since 1971, I believe. And so most agencies won't rely on their full allocation. And it depends on the weather conditions, what's predicted for rain, and then they could adjust it depending on how much rain, how much the reservoirs along the Sierras fill up. But most agencies will roughly, on average, depend on 45, 50%, somewhere in there for their full. No one's really relying on their full allocation. And in our case, we're not even really relying on this for our long-term supply. Again, it's just more backup. We're trying to diversify our water supply portfolio so that in the event Lake Casitas goes dry, we have other means to provide water to folks.
And those examples, one was the wheeling, one was it desal was another one, is that right? Could you just elaborate what all those
Sure.
potential supplies are?
Yeah, no problem. I believe in an earlier letter, that might have been the June 6th letter, we did refer to 3 new supplies, state water, so Wheeling State Water connection with Callegas. Our direct potable reuse project, which we do have legal obligations to have that complete by now, the end of 2023, so it's right around the corner. So that's an additional supply. And then we do also have the potential for desalination at some point further down the line. The desalination is not reflected in the CWRR. It is reflected in our urban water management plan.
And the first one that you indicated, the state water, is that separate and apart from the wheeling aspect, or that's the one that we're talking about?
It's all part of it. State water is part of the wheeling.
Okay.
Multi-agency agreement between ourselves, Callegas, United, Casitas. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Any other question? I just have one. So the bottom line is you feel comfortable that you can meet the demands for water?
Commissioner Freeman, Chairman Freeman, I would not have stamped and signed this. I would be held accountable if, I could be held accountable if I were wrong. I feel very comfortable. I would not stamp and sign something with my professional engineering stamp if that wasn't the case.
Thank you for being here today, Mr. McDermott.
And then I had it in my notes here. So the city of Ventura is willing to take per your letter, the responsibility and liability to supply water to this project, long-term water for the specific project.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No. I'll now call, thank you, Mr. McDermott.
Thank you.
I will call Steve Blois, who's with Metropolitan Water District.
Good morning, Chair Freeman, Commissioners. I'm Steve Blois. I'm a resident of the city of Camarillo. I basically have been involved with water all of my life. When I was born, my father was selling water pipe. I've been involved building pipelines in a construction capacity for 30 years. And then I was the director of the Crestview Mutual Water District in Camarillo for 16 years, most of that time as their secretary. Governor Schwarzenegger appointed me to the Regional Water Quality Control Board, Region 4, which serves Los Angeles and Ventura County. I served there for 4 years. I was appointed and then elected to the Callegas Municipal Water District. I now serve there together with Commissioner Waters. And my colleagues on that board, actually my very first meeting, appointed me to represent them on the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California's board. Last year, the Met board unanimously elected me as their board secretary. I continue to serve in that capacity today and represent the service area of Callegas in Ventura County. I'm also a member of the Agricultural and Industry Relations Committee at Met. So suffice it to say, I know a lot about water. I don't profess to know everything, but I probably know more than most. But to today's point in the agenda item, I've been involved in discussions between Metropolitan Water District and Ventura regarding this interconnection project, probably since its inception. I may have been the one that instigated it, I'm not sure. But suffice it to say, and to the point of this hearing, Metropolitan is committed to facilitating this connection so that the County of Ventura can finally take delivery of the water that they've been paying for since 1971. This is not a simple thing. It involves complicated deals. It involves a lot of attorneys, which I am not. But I wanted to make the point today to you in regards to this matter that Metropolitan, in spite of what others may have said or has been said, we are very committed to having this project succeed. The reason is simple. It fulfills the mission of both Metropolitan Water District and the Cayugas Municipal Water District, which is to provide a reliable source of good quality water in an economical and environmentally sustainable manner. So thank you for letting me address you today. If any questions, I guess I've got to stand here.
Yes, Commissioner Ramirez?
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. If you could just in maybe one or two sentences, just the headline yesterday that Westlands has voted against the water fix. What does that have any potential impact on what's being proposed here?
Well, the water world is a very intricate and complicated deal. Yes, it's got implications. I look at the glass half full. I believe that it provides us in Southern California with the opportunity for more water, not less. And that more water would be at a price less than what we're paying for many of the sources that we currently pay for today.
Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you. The water that could come from Met to go to the city of Ventura, does it, and the city's been paying, you say, like $1 million a year to keep that place. Does it require fees to Met to do that? And I understand it, we'd actually be building pipeline, right? And probably going through different jurisdictions, because I don't think the city of Ventura is in the Metropolitan Water District at this point. So would they have to join the Metropolitan Water District? Would they have to pay fees? And those kind of questions, I'm wondering if you know.
You've asked 2 or 3 questions. Let me address them in order. First of all, it's not Metropolitan's water that the city of Ventura would be buying. It's their water. However, they have no way or means to take delivery of that water except to use other people's pipelines. That's where Metropolitan comes in. And that's where this wheeling talk is. So the water actually belongs to the Department of Water Resources, the state of California. The county of Ventura and others has been paying for that as one of the 29 contractors that are contracted to take that state water project water. They will deliver that water through Metropolitan system and through Cayugas' system. And you're correct, it would require a pipeline to connect Cayugas' system to the city of Ventura system to finally get water to the city of Ventura. And I think, is that all of your questions, or did I skip one?
So generally you have to become part of a district.
Oh,
you have to be
correct.
part of Cayugas, you have to become part of Metropolitan. I imagine that would all come back to potentially come back to LAFCo if that is a redistricting that has to occur.
Metropolitan would welcome Ventura if they decided to join the service area of the Metropolitan Water District. However, it's not a requirement in this case. As I understand the Metropolitan Act or state law, Metropolitan and Cayugas are required to wheel water through our pipelines without them having to become a member of the district.
Okay, so that, and it is, I don't know if there's more information from staff, but it is that whole complicated thing that I guess is there to ensure that, the costs are paid for by those who are, having to spend the money. So I just have to have that understanding. Generally, you have to become members of you have to include it in your district. So maybe our LAFCo staff can answer that for us.
Or Steve, maybe the city of Ventura has been paying for years and years. I think probably the The question is, do they have to pay an annexation fee?
They do not have to pay an annexation fee. The fees that they would have to pay would be Metropolitan and Cayugas's cost for moving that water.
To deliver the water.
And those costs in Metropolitan's case are not inconsequential. It costs a lot of money to pump the water over to the Tehachapi's. In the case of Cayugas, the costs are quite minimal. It's on the order of, I don't know, 10 or 15, don't quote me, but something in that order of magnitude, dollars per acre foot. The Metropolitan's cost to wheel that water is substantially higher than that. And I'm not sure of the exact figure, but it's whatever their cost is, and they're legally obligated to do that.
To deliver the water.
To deliver the water and charge for whatever it costs them to do that delivery.
Okay.
And when you say substantial, do you have an idea what you mean, what that means? So they've already been paying $1 million a year. Is this like more millions of dollars?
You're going to,
Okay.
at the risk of being pinned down, I'm going to quantify that with a ballpark estimate of $500 an acre foot.
Okay.
That's just my best guess at this point.
So in the discussions with the city of Ventura, have those costs been part of their discussions? Do you know?
Absolutely, yes.
I wonder what that means to ratepayers and all of that, and I haven't done the math to figure out what 500 acre feet means based on the number of acre feet that you're anticipating bringing in, and so that...
Well, the cost of desal in the Carlsbad plant, as an example, is about $2,500 an acre foot. The cost of recycled water, we expect that to be around $2,000 an acre foot. That's for the new pilot plant that Metropolitan just held a groundbreaking ceremony on Monday. So stormwater capture is estimated to be in a range of $1,200 to $2,000 an acre foot. You put all of the other different sources of water that we're working on and will do eventually in our portfolio. Imported water, and the State Water Project is one of the cheaper sources of water.
I hope you'll be at the workshop that we're having at the Board of Supervisors. You are a bit
Well,
of
I
an
would
expert
be,
there.
except that I've got a vote and a hearing down at Metropolitan Water District that day to talk about the California water fix.
Okay, it is during the day. Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Vince Daly? Excuse me.
Thank you, Chair Freeman and Commissioners. Basically, I'm just here to say I've been involved with the Venoni since 2004 when Charles approached me and said he couldn't farm anymore, and he asked me about what to do, and I said there's a process. The good news, you're in the sphere. The LAFCo voted you in the sphere. Good news is that it was pre-zoned for residential, so we could go forward with the residential. So we did that, and we, through the process, received unanimous approvals from everybody. The DRC, we got a unanimous vote. The Planning Commission, we received a unanimous vote. And at the City Council, we received a unanimous vote. One of the things that Mr. Venoni said from the beginning, he said, I want you to be careful how we do this. I want to make sure we don't skip steps. I want to make sure that the Venoni name, which there's a lot of Venonis, as you see, they're all over the place. So they've been watching me. So that was something important, and the process was important to adhere to, and even this process today. And I think we, again, went through that process here with LAFCo. And today, you all approved this project as well to be annexed. And where we're at now is a condition that I believe, and I think that I hope you believe has been answered today by the letter. And I would respectfully request you guys to move this along, accept this as the adequate. As you heard from the city engineer, he has his stamp, he has things on the line. People really do put things on the line, especially in this county. There's a lot of integrity in the process, a lot of integrity in the people involved in the process, a lot of integrity in the city of Ventura Water Department. And I think ultimately, they're saying they'll take the responsibility. So this isn't, as Michael Walker said, when you guys have to sort of decide between competing parties, the city says they want it, they unanimously approved it, the water district standing up here saying they have the water. and they'll be responsible. So we respectfully request you guys to consider this to satisfy condition number 9. Thank you very much.
Not speaking.
Does not wish to speak with support you wish to speak?
Mike, your mic is
Mike's on.
Mic's on. Lou, did you wish to speak?
No, I'm just here to support.
Just supporting the project. Thank you. Ellen Brokaw? I saw her here earlier. She supports the project. Does Laura Masonheimer?
I support the project.
She supports.
Do you wish to speak?
I
Okay.
does not wish to speak.
Okay. Supports the project. Eddie Ennis?
I support the project and I have no
Okay. Supports the project. Fred Baskin?
Good morning. I'll try to make this brief because I know you all want to get out of here. I'm a Satakoy resident, have been all my life, lived off of Telephone Road all my life, watched all the development, and have been very, very close to all of the many members of the Vanoni family all my life. I deem this project to kind of be a relatively small potatoes project. I feel for this family who has been drugged through the mud and forced for about 14, 15 years now to persevere to see this project through to fruition. My belief, especially after hearing all of the experts talk this morning, that at this point in time, I am quite confident and I firmly believe and would like to thank you folks for voting to approve this project, which I'm certain that you will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Beverly Cunningham, did you wish to speak?
I support this project.
Okay. Carl Morehouse.
Good morning, Commissioners. It's rather odd to be on this side. And it's been a number of years since I've stood here in front of the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission on this very same dais. But I'm here today because I've been asked in the past by the applicant and their representatives to come and attend, and I've graciously declined. But I thought I would come today for a little bit of background. I will tell you quite candidly, had I been still sitting up there with you, as you have on your previous votes, I would have taken a position of abstention. Not because I have any kind of financial or fiduciary responsibility, but because I sat on the Ventura City Council, and I thought I would leave it to the deliberation of my peers up there on this particular project. I'm here to give you a little background, though, in terms of this particular situation that you're in today. The City of Ventura, quite honestly, is a victim of many past decisions. One of those is its own autonomy for water. It's a conscious decision, as you've heard. The city's been paying into the State Water Project since 1971. Has chosen not to do that. I sat on the council last year when we decided to finally pull the trigger and pursue that. I also found that during my first State of the Union address as mayor that really we are also a victim of many county decisions that were developments on the edge of the city and the city annexed and created kind of the shape that we're in today. I will tell you quite honestly that the council members struggled on this project, as many others on the far east end, that whether or not it met the true definition of infill. We were, of course, the first soar, and in my own personal opinion, that was an errant project, and it's too bad that it got extended in the way it's there. But what happened is that many of the developers saw the opportunity on edges of our city rather than the central part, which we should have infilled properly, and we had no curb line. So therefore, we are in the situation we are today where we have developers who have been knocking at our door who are on the periphery, and yes, although it's infill, we had no curb line, so it's not it's hard to define how that works. I was not pleased actually with the project that abuts this many, many years ago. But that being said, it's now the site of a veterans home, which has become very important to this city. And as the Venonis have indicated, they've been encroached upon. It's been very difficult for them to continue. What is in front of you today is the issue of whether or not the city has enough water. And think you've heard sufficiently from the water staff and from our planning staff the city's position with regards to that. I know that you all have in your respective agencies staff, and you have to place reliance on those staffs. Well, I have great respect for Mr. Loma, and having understood fully the role of this body under Cortese Knox Hertzberg, the city of Ventura had to place reliance on staff in terms of the water predictions. I said on the general plan update in 2015, at the time we made projections for housing, we thought we had enough water. Later down the line, we discovered that there were problems, and certainly it's been exacerbated by the drought. But the city council in its past configurations allowed this project to go forward, and the immediate past configurations of the council also demanded that city staff start to pay closer attention to water. We actually carved off and created a water district, or water department. That water department was forced to work very, very closely with the community development department on monitoring our growth rate along with our availability of water. So, you know as I do that staff is always neutral, that they bring forward no particular agenda. It's not prejudice on their part, and what they've presented to the city in moving forward on this project was one of neutrality, simply saying that we believe we have enough water. Again, as you've heard, the city has been working very fiercely in trying to conserve water and working towards finally connecting after all this time with the state water project. Additionally, the city of Ventura is under a housing deficit. We have not, if we had to do our state report, and I don't know whether we do that as adequately as we should under RENA and the housing element, but we are behind in our actual number of units. And we've all been reading about the housing crisis, the state's efforts to try to cram that down local government's throats, and the fact that we were going to have to meet some kind of housing, particularly in terms of costs. What I would suggest to this commission is, if you are still in question or dispute about whether or not there's adequate water, and I would rely again upon staff that there is, you might take the city's suggestion that you use a neutral third party. Not that Mr. Loma lacks expertise, but you've heard also expertise from staff here. If you need to be the true arbitrators, perhaps it would help manage to break the logjam if you had a third neutral party on the outside that could help you in that decision. Otherwise, I would suggest you go ahead and go forward with the approval of this. The city the former council configuration approved this project and realized that it was part of our process all along. So I thank you for your time. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer.
Any questions, Mr. Morehouse?
Nice to see you again.
Well, it's been a little calmer in my life. Thank you.
Next speaker card is Michael McCall.
I support the project.
Supports the project. Christian Baez.
I support the project. I don't wish to speak.
Thank you. Marie Abato.
I support the project.
Thank you. Robert Braverman.
Hello, everybody. My name is Robert Braverman, and I'm a licensed pest control advisor here in California. I work with associates in Sectory, and we help Charles manage his pest control. As I'm sure you're aware, in California, we now have a pest, the Asian citrus psyllid, and we are forced to spray all citrus 3 times a year to control this terrible pest. Charles has been encroached by these houses, and if you get out a tape measure, he's close to 30 feet away from a front door. At the moment, 25 feet is the boundary, but as you're aware, in California, every year these regulations get stricter and stricter for personal safety. And pretty soon here, I believe Charles will have to either remove a ton of trees or just remove everything before somebody's standing in front of a board like this one complaining that they got sprayed. And I hope you consider Charles's application. Thank you.
Thank you. Edgar Terry.
Morning, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Ed Terry, longtime grower here in the county, and I support this project, and I was here earlier in the year to discuss why, and basically it comes down to the fact that the property's been encroached upon. You can't farm it economically, and I think we've heard a number of experts today talk about there's plenty of water, and the project's been in process for 15 years, and it's time to do it. It isn't time to go back and farm that property. That ship has sailed. It needs to be developed. It's surrounded on 3 sides by development. If I were farming it, I would politely tell Charles that I'm not going to farm it any longer. I wouldn't want to take the liability of having a pest control company out there, as you just heard, spray. I do farm adjacent to some housing, and it's not a treat. It's very difficult in this county to be able to both farm and satisfy your neighbors, and when the neighbors are surrounding you on all sides, it's almost impossible, no matter how green the field is. So the time has come to go ahead and make this decision. The right decision is to go ahead and support it and move on with life. And I highly recommend that the commissioners do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sean Pereski, I may be pronouncing that incorrectly.
I support the project, but I don't want to speak.
Okay. Carol Davis? Or Davies? Supports. Okay. Stephanie Caldwell.
Good morning, Chair Freeman and Commissioners. My name is Stephanie Caldwell, and I serve as the President and CEO of the Ventura Chamber of Commerce. And on behalf of our 720 members who represent about 25,000 employees here in Ventura, I speak before you today. The Ventura Chamber of Commerce has identified the lack of available housing at all levels as the single most, the largest impediment against economic growth here in our area. The lack of available housing as well as affordability issues make Ventura less competitive than many of our neighboring cities and counties. Even with the projects that are in process right now, we're still lagging behind other areas. I won't elaborate further on the need for housing. I know you're all well aware of that. But we have a unique opportunity in front of us today. Specifically, you have a unique opportunity in front of you today to bring in new housing at a variety of levels that will help to satisfy that very, very much needed workforce housing. This project has been in the process for years. The Venoni family has been very patient and has answered every issue that has been put before them. And now I believe the city of Ventura has done the same. I was here at the last hearing earlier this spring when this came up, and I hope that you will be satisfied with their expert testimony today and approve this project. Thank you.
Thank you. One more card, Daniel Cormode or Cormode.
Morning, Chairman, members of the Commission. The issue at hand is to determine whether or not Ventura Water submitted written confirmation with supporting documentation the city has an adequate long-term water supply to meet demand. I support LAFCo staff's conclusion that the city of Ventura has not demonstrated in writing with supporting documentation the city has an adequate and available long-term water supply to meet the demand. There's additional information to support the conclusion that the water management plans have not adequately considered long-term water needs. Results of an investigation by the Ventura County Grand Jury has concluded that Ventura County cities, not just Ventura, but other cities, have not adequately considered long-term water needs. City water plans are based on historical availability, may no longer be applicable. City plans address minimum state required 3-year drought plans instead of long-term drought. Long-term city plans are based on optimistic views there'll be much water available. Since many cities in the county rely on metropolitan, cities should base their plans on the wholesale's prediction that retail water demand will outstrip total reliable resources by 2040. A summary of the comprehensive water resources report does not identify the potential 45% reduction of delivery in February 2019 when Lake Casitas is expected to reach a storage level of 65,000 acre feet, nor the loss of delivery when Casitas becomes dry in August 2021 if the current drought continues. We can't say Easton water and Casitas water. Easton water is city water, not just for the East End. Casitas goes dry, all that East End water has to support the whole city. Furthermore, the statement made by Ventura cities that the Advanced Potable Rios project would be available by 2023 is not supported by completion dates for water projects contained in the City of Ventura 2016-2022 proposed capital improvement plan. I prepared a chart illustrating milestones of projects related to sources of water developed from the City of Ventura capital improvement program, and the Advanced Water Plant potable reuse is not projected until 2025, not 2023. And these are projected completion dates. There's no contracts, there's no plans, there's nothing to assure that we're going to have any state water or direct potable reuse or indirect potable reuse by 2025. I urge you to not approve this project because there is not available water to support future demand for 2040. True, you can juggle the numbers to say we're using less now, therefore we have more water to use in the future. But we keep this up, we're going to have no water for everybody. So I urge you to go ahead and not approve this. I feel sorry for the family that's been brought through all this. However, there's just not enough water in the future to support all these projects. Thank you.
Commissioners, is there anyone you would, I'm getting ready to close the public hearing, but is there anyone you would want to ask questions to before I close the public hearing? Mr. McDermott or Mr. Ward or anyone from the city?
No.
Or to staff, could I ask a question?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we've covered everybody here.
One of the points that was just made, if Casitas goes dry, will they then want East End water? Or is that already taken care of?
Casitas water cannot go outside of Casitas' boundaries. If Casitas goes dry and cannot continue to supply the water to the area within their district, water supplies from outside the cities or outside the district of the city can be used to apply to the areas within Casitas. It can go that way, but it can't go outside Casitas.
So it could be possible that water could come into the area of Casitas to make up for the fact if they have a reduction in the amount of water they can provide.
Right, and that can happen at any time. If they do in fact get state water, that's state water. Well, depending on, actually I'm not going to use that example, but yeah, any water supplies that can come into the city outside of Casitas can be used within Casitas, most likely.
And excuse me.
With that,
I'm sorry, just one other question, sorry. When they did their projections, when we're looking at the 10-year, 5-year, 3-year, 2-year, did any of those projections include future water sources, the two that they're looking at, the wheeling and the sewer to tap?
Not in the information that I presented.
Okay, so that their water report only is based on the amount of water currently available, not future supplies?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I will close the public hearing. With that, I will open discussion of the commissioners.
Madam Chair, we're done. I'm going to share some statements and so forth. Okay. First of all, I want to thank all the speakers, and the commissioners and the audience. But I'm ready to approve this annexation, and I think that we've gone back and forth many times on this issue. And I'm just going to summarize. I had a lot of writing here, but I'm just going to summarize what I wanted to say was that we asked for a letter from the city of Ventura, and we got a letter from the city's acting water manager and community development director that they have long-term water for this project. We asked that last time in the commission, and they brought the letter to us. So I'm ready to accept this letter. And I think I asked Joe McDermott, is the city willing to take the responsibility and liability for providing the long-term water? And he said yes. As LAFCo commissioners, I think it's appropriate that we look at those annexations and reviewed to see if they have sufficient water. And I think it's important that we do that as LAFCO members, and I think legal counsel just mentioned that earlier, that it's our responsibility that we do that. One of the things in that letter that unfortunately I believe, and I want to share this, I believe the city of Ventura went a little bit too far in disputing the process and other issues brought before the commission by Kai, our commissioner. I believe that Kai is doing his job. He's doing a job, and he's following direction from the commission. He's not doing this on his own. I think that he follows the commission and follows the LAFCo law. And I believe that that information allows us to make the proper decisions as decision makers that's going to affect a tremendous amount of people. I'm disappointed that the city directed its frustration towards Kai. And I know that Kai takes his responsibility very seriously when you bring this information to the commission. And I want Kai to scrutinize all the applications and make sure that we have sufficient water, make sure that we're following LAFCO law. And I think it's really important that we do that. So I just want to share that he was following his role as the executive officer for the commission and making sure that we make the proper decisions and make sure that we satisfy and make sure that we're fair with everybody. So I just want to share that it's not Kai's fault that he's fighting with the city of Ventura and so forth. And he's following our directions, and I believe he's doing that in a proper manner. In the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, the Venoni family, I believe, has farmed for hundreds of years, 100 years, going maybe on several hundreds, and he's been left in limbo. He's going back and forth and back and et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's about time that we approve this annexation. And as the city said, they have sufficient water, and they're working with Callegas, they're working with Met, they're working hopefully to get their water straightened out in the future. So I believe that and I hope anyway that the city and LAFCO, that we learn something from this process, that we learn to work together, that we as commissioners put our LAFCO hats on. I take my my supervisor's hat off, put my LAFCO hat on, and I believe that I want to follow LAFCO rules at this time. But again, I just want to thank Kai for the good work that he's doing for us. He's following our direction in LAFCO law. Sure, Ventura is doing the same thing, but I just want to share that we need to come together and solve the solution. So my recommendation is we approve this item at this time.
Other commissioners?
Chair?
Commissioner Parvin?
I agree with you. I think I've agreed all along the process, but today, we we need to ensure that we have addressed condition number 9. I feel 100%. If there's more than 100%, I feel that. That we have the response we're looking for. Even more so because Joe McDermott came today and so did Steve Boyce. And I think the experts came and spoke. And I'm not an expert in water, but I feel like after this project, I'm becoming more of an expert in water. And I also know that any project coming to LAFCo is going to look at their water far more deeply after this project than any project ever before. So with that, I would like to put a motion to approve.
And I'll second the motion.
Are there other comments from the commission? Commissioner Ramirez?
I'll defer to Commissioner Ross first. I'd always like to hear what he has to say.
Well, first off, I thank everyone for your patience in this process. Just by everyone here today, there's a lot of resources being spent on this process. And if anything, I think that this process shows that this commission is very thoughtful and that we take our job seriously and that we are not a rubber stamp, that we do consider the facts and the experts. I believe that we probably could have come to a decision earlier in the year if we had the experts present, especially I think the general manager of the water, of Ventura Water, and also Steve Bloss. Those were exactly the things that I was looking for to, in my mind, approve this annexation and remove that final condition. So thank you.
Commissioner Ramirez?
Thank you very much. You know, there's a saying in Spanish, it's in English too, it's sin agua no hay vida. Without water, there is no life. And we're dealing with something so extremely serious that affects all of us. I've spoken before about how we need to, each of us personally in our homes, our businesses, in everyday life, have to develop a water ethic, knowing that almost every drop of water is precious, and it creates food, it creates life, decent housing conditions. I'll go on a little bit. I've been to countries where the women of the family have to walk miles to get water that's not the cleanest for their family and carry it on their head, and it doesn't last all day. We here in our country are lucky enough to turn the tap on and then later complain about what it costs. So I'm extremely aware of that. I do want to finally thank our staff for bringing a I believe, very professional approach to this. And I agree with Commissioner Zaragoza, Supervisor Zaragoza, that our staff is following the law, providing the information for us to make the decision we are charged with. What is best for the entire county, not for one city, one family, one special interest. And I do appreciate that the Venoni family have been great members of the community, but we are supposed to make objective decisions, and I think we can do that today. Finally, I'm really glad that we finally have the water manager here, which is something that was so curious that we couldn't get that gentleman here. We had a letter that was nice, couldn't ask questions, and it left a lot of questions in my mind. And I will tell you, members of the residents, staff members of the city of Ventura, not everybody thinks this is a great project, and that's from the top to bottom. So it isn't as if the entire city hierarchy and residents like the project, and I think there's some real issues about where it's located, but I recognize the project's been encroached upon. So this has never been anything personal. We're doing our job, and for me, the statement or the number on the worst case scenario is very frightening. 289 acre feet, that's frightening. And we hope that we get water, we get storage, we have the mechanism to deliver it so we can continue to have our economy. And but I think we've taken a very thoughtful process. I think it's taken a long time. I don't think it's fair to blame our staff. The commissioners directed that. So I'm ready to vote yes on this project.
Commissioner Parks?
Yeah, I also want to appreciate the people who came. You've been here a lot. You've been to a lot of other hearings a lot. So thank you, and I'm sure the Vanonis appreciate your loyalty too. And I also enjoy the family and got to see them at the Ventura County Fair. And I also appreciate the citizens of the city of Ventura who have cut back their water use significantly, because the amount of water hasn't changed. It has stayed the same. The only thing that's different in the last 10 years is the demand. People have done their part in cutting back. And so that all is very positive. And I was opposed to this project not only because of my concerns about the water, but also primarily because of what I consider incompatible land uses, which it is right now. You know, as a farm, we're hearing the concerns of the ability to do conventional farming here because of the potential pesticide drift and noise and dust and all those kind of things. But I also had big concerns about the compatibility of putting homes next to loud noises that will come from a sheet metal recycling plant, from Harrison trucks that start up at 4 or 5 in the morning that will wake up the residents, from the diesel emissions from those, from 2 open sewage tanks that are immediately adjacent to the site that are odorous and noisy. It's just not a good place for children, I don't think, and so and others, sensitive receptors they call them. I do have concerns about that. What else are you going to do? I happen to be on the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy. I love the ability of being able to provide a park to an area, particularly a low-income area. You in this area is predominantly Latino, it's predominantly low-income, and there isn't much park space. That's another issue altogether, and I understand that's always nice to have those dreams and visions, but when it comes down to it, you want to make sure you make sufficient amount of money for your property. My concerns about the water, in this regard, we have kind of a hope and a wish to be able to bring water from Met, wheeling water when you're dealing with a period of time of drought. There's less water to wheel, so it isn't, to me, a reliable source. The aspect of being able to do the project to treat sewer water for drinking water is the other new source you're looking at. It's a very expensive, complicated project also, and we don't have guarantees of time frames. It's nice, however, that the city can deny the water permit if they don't feel they have the ability to serve it. But what are we doing here on LAFCo? What is our job here? Our job here is to make sure that we have confidence that there is, and I know Commissioner Parvin is over 100% sure that there is adequate services to provide for the new development that's being annexed in. And I look to areas. For example, LAFCo's mission is, try to preserve farmland, try to have compatible uses, try to ensure that we don't sprawl. Those are all nice things that we as a society would like to have. But what we have to have water. We have to have capacity in our sewer treatment plants. I think about the community of Los Osos, Baywood Park. You cannot put a faucet in a home there. That's the result of of exceeding their capacity in growth. They don't have the ability. So that affects your property values. That land, those people trying to sell those homes or trying to sell property there, it hurts their property values because they don't have the ability to add another faucet in a home or add another hookup to their sewer plant. Those kind of things are real, and that can impact you. Once you get to a point where residents, and good for those residents, have reduced their water use significantly, the implications in fire capacity, having the water to put out fires. Water is a really serious thing. And if I had my druthers, I'd want to actually have a buffer of water that you have available, instead of going to the very line of, do you have it? And if you look from a predictable measure, and usually economics and others will say looking at the long-term view is more capable of understanding the prediction, whether your estimate's right or not, than looking at the short term. Looking at the long term, it doesn't look good, both looking in the past and looking in the future. And I would think that when it comes to water, we would want to be as careful as we can. But like I said, it is satisfying to know that the city will not give a water permit if they don't have water availability. And I look forward to the workshop that the supervisors are going to do and really get a good understanding, because that one issue, for example, what if Casitas isn't there for the Casitas customers? The citizens of Ventura are going to have to share some more of their water in the East End to provide for the Casitas customers. So you have those issues out there. There isn't much of a buffer. I wish the city well in their projects. They're certainly needed. So, because of my past objections, and they do remain, I will continue to oppose the project, but I wish everyone well.
Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I share one more statement? I just want to thank the City of Ventura for this project, because there's much needed affordable housing that we need here in Ventura County. And I just heard the other day, I think there was a presentation I heard that's the vacancy rate here in Ventura County is only about 2%, so I think this is much needed affordable housing. So I really commend the City of Ventura for that. And I think it's a project that's much needed. I just wanted to share that
Thank
too.
you. I'll just make one brief comment. I want to thank the city for participating today and for the information that was provided, and to our staff who brought the issues forward. As I look at the process, when all is said and done, the responsibility goes back to the city, any city, to provide services. And if the city says they can provide the service, if they don't, the responsibility comes back on them, and the people and their constituents are the people they have to answer to. So I think that the city has presented us with enough information under condition number 9. But in the long run, it is the city that has the responsibility for providing the water and all services, and they have their own water agency. And I think that out of respect for the information they've provided, that I agree that we could move forward on this, and so I will call for a vote. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposition?
So we-
One opposition.
We'll go by roll.
2.
Not have a roll call?
Yes, excuse me.
Roll call?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're going to,
Yes.
Aye.
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 yes,
Aye.
motion carries. Thank you.
Okay.
We'll move on to item 11.
That's not right.
Excuse me. Oh, okay.
We voted
Carmen
yes.
voted yes.
It says no on there.
One no.
His first day was yesterday.
Okay, we'll move on to item 11.
I think we,
Okay,
Yeah.
just for clarification to the audience, the vote was, the only nay vote was 1, and that was Commissioner Parks.
correct.
So it was full,
Was approved.
it was approved. Okay, item 11, amendments to Commissioners Handbook, Division 3, changes of organization and reorganization, and Division 4, spheres of influence.
Give me just a moment as we get the presentation loaded. Okay. All right, thank you, Madam Chair. This is agenda item number 11. It's regarding amendments to the Commissioner's Handbook pertaining to military compatibility. I wanted to give a little bit of background on what brought us here today. So back in May of 2011, the Commission accepted an invitation from the Navy base Ventura County to participate in the development of a joint land use study, which I'll be referring to as the JLUS. Now, a joint land use study is a study with partner agencies that look at ways to reduce incompatible uses that would affect the operations of the Navy base Ventura County from future development. In 2015, the JLUS was completed, and in January of 2016, the staff from the Ventura County Transportation Commission, which was the host agency, they were the agency that was primarily responsible for developing the JLUS, they presented a presentation to the Commission regarding the completed JLUS and its recommended strategies. Now, as a result of that, the Commission did adopt a resolution expressing a couple of things. First was the support for the continued collaboration with regional partners to evaluate the JLUS, recommended strategies, and identified compatibility issues to decide feasible steps for implementation. And further, that the Commission recognizes that the Naval Base Ventura County JLUS as a resource to help preserve the long-term compatibility between the Navy base and surrounding areas to better protect health, safety, and welfare. Now, in addition to that action of adopting that resolution, the Commission did direct staff to develop policies to implement those strategies, those recommended strategies that were directly related to LAFCo. Now, there are 3 strategies in the JLUS that directly affect LAFCo. They are pertaining to annexations and sphere of influence changes. The first is that the JLUS jurisdictions should communicate with Navy base Ventura County on all proposed annexations or changes to spheres of influence or infrastructure service areas for review and comment before they submit their proposals to LAFCo for a decision. The second strategy is support land use policies and laws that prevent encroachment. LAFCo should update and review its guidelines to include the evaluation of military compatibility issues within the JLUS study area. And LAFCo should review school proposals within the JLUS study area to ensure siting and development are done in a way to be compatible with the ACU's guidance. This is the Air Installation Compatibility Use Zone Study. And what that basically does, it identifies compatible and non-compatible uses within and around the Navy base Ventura County, primarily related to noise contours and accident areas for aircraft. So it basically says schools shouldn't be placed in a spot where aircraft might put them at risk. The third strategy was to update municipal service review process, that the Ventura LAFCo should update its municipal service review process to incorporate military compatibility guidelines. So staff has 2 recommended policies that implement or address these recommended strategies. The first would add a new section to the Division 3 regarding changes of organization and reorganization, and it would be entitled Military Compatibility. The second would apply to spheres of influence, and again, regarding military compatibility. Now, I won't go over the specific wording because they're rather lengthy. They are in your staff report, but I do have a summary of what these recommended policies would provide. So the first is that LAFCo will not support a change of organization or reorganization or changes to an agency's sphere of influence that the Navy base Ventura County determines would be in conflict with its military operations as determined by the JLUS and the ACUs. It would also encourage lead agencies that are considering development projects within the Navy base Ventura County military influence area to coordinate with the Navy base for review and comment before submitting an application to LAFCo. It would provide that LAFCo would coordinate with the Navy base regarding any proposed changes of organization, reorganizations, or changes to spheres of influence within the Navy base military influence area. And finally, it defines the military influence area as the area generally bounded by the city of Camarillo to the north, the city of Oxnard to the west, the Pacific Ocean to the south, and the Santa Monica Mountains to the east. Now, when we were moving forward with these recommended policies, I did contact the Navy Base Ventura County staff, Amanda Fagan with the Navy Base who's here today, to kind of coordinate how to approach these policies to best address those recommendations for LAFCo from the JLUs. So I came up with some draft language and I ran that language past Amanda. The Navy Base had some suggested changes, which I made. And then we presented these to the other land use jurisdictions that would be affected. So this would be the City of Camarillo, City of Oxnard, and the County Resource Management Agency. The City of Oxnard expressed a couple of concerns, so we did meet and we went over those concerns. There was representatives from all of these agencies, and we agreed to make some further changes that address these concerns. So the recommended draft policies that we have before you have been reviewed by all of these agencies, and none of these agencies have any concerns with the language. VCTC is actually supportive of the policies. So these are the specific wording of the policies. Like I said, I went over the summary. And with that, we do recommend that the Commission adopt the resolution adding Section 3245 and 423 to the Commissioner's Handbook regarding military compatibility. And as I said, staff from the Navy base is here to answer any questions.
Questions by commissioners?
I
Commissioner
have a
Parvin?
question. It's been a while since we looked at this process, but were the school districts, county, and cities that are surrounding this area, were they involved in the process?
Were they involved in the JLUs? Probably a question for the Navy base.
Okay. Then here's my next question.
Okay.
And this one's for you. On page 58, you mention that under the military compatibility, it says, unless exceptional circumstances are shown to exist. So what do you think would be an exceptional, do you have any idea, or do you just think you're just kind of like advanced planning ahead that there could be something that's different?
Exactly, and that phrase is found in a number of your policies, that just in the event that something that we haven't foreseen at this point does come into play, and there is a reason that it makes sense for your commission, because you have the ultimate discretion on an annexation. If something comes up that does warrant an exceptional circumstance, then the commission can determine that, and they don't have to abide by this restriction.
Chair.
Yes.
That was my concern about will not support, and suppose there is a special circumstance where we might need to determine something otherwise. I love the idea of knowing what the other LAFCos are doing. Was there any precedent that we borrowed from other LAFCos in the state that also share boundaries with, or have to deal with boundaries regarding the military?
There was not. I actually sent out an email to all of the other executive officers, and none of them have faced this situation. And the Cal LAFCo executive officer is very interested to know how this turns out, because it may very well be used as an example for future situations like this.
Madam Chair, in JLU's Woods, they had quite a few stakeholders, the cities and the county, and everybody was involved in that. And VCTC was, they were the people running the whole operation with the Naval Base Ventura County. So there was agreement all the way across, and the thing was, and I'm sure that I can be corrected, that the JLUs is an item that could be used by cities, for their planning and so forth, and et cetera. And they don't have to do anything with it, but they can use it in the way we're doing it now.
Right, absolutely. And that was some of the comments by the City of Oxnard and City of Camarillo, that they intend to only move forward with projects that are consistent with the JLUs and the ACUs. And that's one of the reasons why they don't have too many concerns with the wording in here, because they have no intent of.
And the JLUs, some of the things that, one of the biggest things that the military had was encroachment, issues, and Ormond, Oxnard's work with Ormond Beach and the universities and also the city of Camarillo, to keep that area, unencroached, for the military use, because it's really, really important to all of us that we do keep that base, and in a viable manner that can protect us here. I belong to our DP 21 too, so we advocate a lot for Naval Base Ventura County, and it's important for all of us to support that.
Commissioner Parvin?
Yeah, another follow-up question on school districts, and I think you can answer this one. Because we've had school districts encroach on farmland. So what if a school district wants to go into the encroachment area for the base? Would that be something based on these rules we could stop, or no? We have no authority over that.
Well, it depends if that school needs services from one of the adjacent cities. So if a school wants to be built, say, just to the east of Oxnard, your commission doesn't have jurisdiction over the school wanting to site it there, but your commission does have jurisdiction over the city and whether it can extend services to the school. So if the services are necessary for the school and the commission does not want to see the school built because it might be incompatible, your commission can deny the annexation.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
I have a question.
I do have a speaker card.
I have a question.
Commissioner Ramirez?
Or more like a comment, because in Oxnard we are very conscious of encroachment, as Commissioner Zaragoza said. And in the past, housing projects have been considered that would have perhaps interfered with naval operations that luckily were rejected. And I personally hope that we continue to do that. And the advantage for Oxnard is that it helps us restore the wetlands area, which should not, it's very sensitive and should not have development. That's a little bit aside. It's not a LAFCo issue per se, but just trying to avoid encroachment so that our naval base, which is one of the few places that our Navy can train people who fly, who land on aircraft carriers, I understand it's Pacific test range as well, that is very important for national security and for our Ventura economy to keep it going. So I just wanted to put that on the record. Thank you.
Can I share something else too? Because the sea range that we have out here at Magoo is probably one of the best in the whole world, for training and so forth, or unmanned vehicles and et cetera. But it's just something that really, really we need desperately here in Ventura County, and in the nation for that matter. But you're right. Thank you.
I will open the public hearing. Amanda Fagan.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. My name is Amanda Fagan, and I'm the Community Planning Liaison Officer for Naval Base Ventura County. I'm accompanied today by the Deputy Air Operations Officer, Lieutenant Sean Hale. Our Installation Commanding Officer, Captain Chris Yonke, sends his regards, but was unable to join us today because of a memorial event that's happening today for Gold Star families over at Port Hueneme. First and foremost, I want to say thank you to the Commission members and the staff for your participation in the development of the Joint Land Use Study itself, including 2 members of your Commission who served as policy committee members during the Joint Land Use Study, including Supervisor Parks and Commissioner Rooney. And now to thank you for your consideration of policies to implement recommendations of the Joint Land Use Study. As you probably know, Naval Base Ventura County is a premier naval installation that consists of Port Hueneme, Point Magoo, and San Nicolas Island. It's home to the Pacific Seabees, the West Coast home port of the E-2 Hawkeyes, home to 3 warfare centers that serve as a hub for naval research, research development, acquisition, test, and evaluation, and supporting the one-of-a-kind 36,000 square mile Point Magoo Sea Range. I've had the honor to work on the Joint Land Use Study since its initiation in 2011, first serving as the project manager for the Department of Defense Office of Economic Adjustment, which provided the grant to Ventura County Transportation Commission to actually complete the Joint Land Use Study. And after many visits to attend policy and technical committee meetings, I liked it here so much that I relocated with my family and now serve Naval Base Ventura County exclusively as the Community Planning Liaison Officer. As the Commission recognized in January of 2016, the JLIS is a resource to help preserve long-term compatibility between NBVC and the surrounding areas to better protect public health, safety, and welfare. Again, thank you so much for your consideration of these policies to implement the JLIS strategies. Unless I'm mistaken, I think LAFCo may be the first agency to formally implement policies, so congratulations and thank you again for your consideration. And if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions?
I have a question.
Oh, about the school districts. Thank you for the reminder. The joint land use study, as Supervisor Zaragoza mentioned, was prepared with a variety of stakeholders involved. I looked quickly at the list of policy and technical committee members, and CSU Channel Islands was involved in both the policy and technical committees. I didn't see any names from the school district specifically on those two committees. However, the JLIS was prepared with a robust public outreach over a number of years. I believe it was like 2 to 3 years of actual planning time. So there were lots of opportunities for the public and school districts to be involved. So I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer as to which school districts particularly participated. But school districts it is kind of a challenging area statewide and nationwide, really, because schools are one of the elements that we really want to protect, in particular related to the noise contours and accident potential zones. So LAFCo has an important role in that service provision and ensuring compatibility, really for the protection of the schools and the children who would attend them. So, thank you.
Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, I know that VCTC also is responsible to work with the schools regarding flights, airports, and so forth. So the Ventura County Transportation Commission. So we look at that too. The compatibility of should the school be under a flight path or not, and so forth. And I think VCTC works with the schools and the cities.
Yes, as the Airport Land Use Commission, they do have a decision-making role. And I believe there's a recommendation also in the Joint Land Use Study to update the Airport Comprehensive Land Use Plan in coordination with the updated Air Installations Compatible Use Zone study that we released in 2016. So that certainly is a part of the role as well.
Any other questions? I'll close the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have a comment. I want to thank Ms. Fagan for being here. She's a stalwart. She's at every meeting I attend. She sits through our long council meetings in Oxnard. I really appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
They're usually pretty fascinating, so thank you.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I'll do a roll call.
Zaragoza.
Commissioner Parvin did the second.
Yeah.
Commissioner Parks? Yes, and I have to go to a meeting.
Commissioner Parkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Burnett?
Yes.
Commissioner Ross?
Aye.
Commissioner Freeman?
Aye.
Commissioner Zaragoza?
Aye.
Commissioner Waters?
Aye.
Okay. Now we'll move on to item 12. And the issue is whether the alternate should be part of the closed session. I think you've seen the staff report in the past. We have included them. They cannot vote, but they can participate. What is the pleasure of the commission?
Chair, as a previous alternate commissioner, I was granted the opportunity to participate in that closed hearing, and I do believe it's very valuable to have input from the alternate commissioners.
I wanted to
Any
ask
objection?
I just want to ask one question, probably of our consulate. According to the report, says according to the State Attorney General, LAFCo alternates may not attend closed session, and then we change that. Are we not in agreement with the
You
State Attorney?
need to keep reading. There's an unless toward the end of that sentence.
Unless is the one that, okay.
Unless your commission determines that the alternates have an official or essential role to play in the closed session. And that's what you're being asked to determine at this point.
I think, though, I was previously an alternate, and then when a regular commissioner wasn't allowed to, or wasn't able to be here, suddenly I would be called to vote. And if you hadn't been privy to what had gone on in closed session, you were at a real disadvantage. So I do think it's important.
Okay.
So do I have a motion?
I'll move. We have alternates in the closed session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We will now, we're going to, as stated earlier, we will take item 14 and go into closed session right now.
Yeah, ma'am. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Now we'll go on to the compensation of the executive officer. Do I have
Yep.
a motion?
Madam Chair, we need a motion for compensation. After looking at the evaluation and of Kai and also sharing some of the goals and objectives, I'd like to recommend a 5% increase.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Do we,
You need-
individually?
Any opposition? And the seconder was, I'm sorry? You want a roll call?
I second.
Probably maybe any further discussion after the motion is made?
I made the motion.
And a second, and let's have a discussion.
Go.
Comments? Mr. Roth?
It should be before or after the second and first, no? For the vote?
We can now, right?
Discussion before the vote, right?
Yeah,
If there's
before.
anything to discuss, I just want to make sure if anyone had anything to say that it was said. I'll say something. 5% seems appropriate to me. I had the same number in my head
Mhm.
based on the
Parameters.
parameters we had.
Okay,
Any other comment?
no?
Question?
Call for
Call
the
for the-
question. All in favor?
Roll call.
Seconder of the motion was.
I made the motion and,
I second that.
Commissioner Zaragoza made the
Do we need a
motion.
roll call vote on this,
yes.
Mr. Walker?
As a general practice, it's wise to do a roll call, so we have a clear record of each individual vote.
Okay.
Commissioner Carmen?
Aye.
Commissioner Ramirez?
Aye.
Commissioner Ross?
Aye.
Commissioner Zaragoza?
Aye.
Alternate Commissioner Waters?
Aye.
Chair Freeman?
Aye. Okay.
Okay. So,
Informational items. Kai, did you want to make a presentation? Got the Ventura County Fire District annexation?
No, that's just informational.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other executive officers report that you want to comment on?
No, not at this time or at this late hour. Just the next meeting will be October 18th. And again, thank you for your last item. Thank you.
And then we do have our LAFCo conference in October.
25th, 26th?
Right, yes, in San Diego.
I will be traveling down there if anyone's interested in carpooling. No pressure otherwise. Just throwing it out there.
Rochelle and I will be taking the train.
Take the train. Yeah.
that sounds like fun.
Greenhouse gases here.
Any other comment? I would like to just, under commissioners' comments, I don't know if anyone saw this, but the Port District got the Greenest Port of the Year award.
It's fabulous.
Yeah,
And it was at the conference. It's the Green Shipping Summit USA, and it was the first time it was held in the United States. And their executive director, Kristen, got Executive of the Year. And the port was honored for the greenest
And-
port.
And they were
that's-
commended at our Board of Supervisors for
Yeah.
that.
I mean, that's great.
Excellent.
I don't know if everybody saw
Yeah,
that.
I did. I actually sent a note of congratulations to
Yeah.
Kristen Deckus. I wanted to, if I could, just say that I had planned to attend the LAFCo conference in San Diego and would have loved to carpool or take the train. But I've been invited. I represent the city of Oxnard, Camarillo, and Port Hueneme at Southern California Association of Governments, and I've been invited to go to a conference at the same time in Japan and South Korea.
Whoa.
And ordinarily I say fabulous, South Korea. So stay tuned. We'll see if I go or something else happens. So that's why I'd miss. So we'll
Have a
stay
good
tuned.
trip.
Thank you. I hope everything stays calm.
Yes.
Either way, there's bombs over there.
Well, you never know if the bomb's coming right here.
Right, that's true. But you can give us a call.
Oh, my God.
Any other commission comments?
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. I keep collecting these.
I only have a second because I have to run again, but.
Of course.